everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me for another video. I'm here today with Judith over in Belfast, Ireland. Judith went from doing triathlons to becoming really unwell with post-viral fatigue and chronic fatigue syndrome. She, like all of us that go through this, has had quite the journey, but thankfully is now fully recovered and here to share her story. So Judith, so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
All right, Judith, so can you take us back? It sounds like you were really active, exceptionally active before you became unwell. So what did life look like before you get sick, and then how did this illness start for you?
Yeah, I had a really busy, fun, exciting, active life. I was working full time, so I was working in health improvement as a mental health regional lead for Northern Ireland. I was also studying part-time for a master's, which I was doing in my free time, and then also really active. I just love exercise, being outdoors. I had run a triathlon. Most days I would do some kind of exercise, whether that was just walking the dog or I love cycling. And then also just love like socializing, hanging out with my friends, going for food, going for concerts. So my weekends were really busy, my evenings were really busy. And then when I got sick, that just completely changed. I got sick initially around October 2020, which with what I think was viral pneumonia. And really it was just a lower respiratory, some kind of lower respiratory tract viral infection that caused quite bad symptoms in terms of I had like a relentless cough and really bad breathlessness. And then with that came the fatigue as well. But initially I kind of just assumed this was a really bad viral infection. And for that first month, those symptoms were really intense. The chest symptoms were really intense. And I suppose I didn't really take much notice of the fatigue at that stage or much concern about the fatigue at that stage because I just encompassed it all together. And then those kind of chest symptoms took maybe about 6 weeks to clear. So it was quite intense. But that's when I started to notice that the fatigue was lingering. Although I was getting better in terms of those respiratory kind of symptoms, the fatigue was very much still lingering. I was really struggling still on a day-to-day basis. I was struggling with even basic things like taking a shower where we're taking all of my energy. I spent so much of my time in bed, and if I wasn't in bed, everything was on the sofa, and really not, obviously I was off work and I wasn't able to do very much. Even things like talking on the phone with my friends and family was difficult. So such a contrast for me from the life that I had to all of a sudden being really unwell and unable to leave the house.
Wow, so that is a dramatic change in your life. So at first you didn't think too much of this. At what point did you start to feel like something's wrong? I'm getting worried.
I think it was maybe around Christmas. So I got sick in the October, and when I got to Christmas, I was still really struggling with the fatigue. I remember that Christmas, I was able to get up, got myself dressed, put my makeup on, showed up to Christmas dinner the best that I could. I stayed for food and I just came home and went straight back to bed. And I actually remember just getting to bed and just that feeling that you get, the complete exhaustion that takes over your entire body where everything just hurts. And it was at that point that I kind of thought, I started to get a little bit concerned. So I went to the GP after Christmas because I was continuing to have the fatigue symptoms and they weren't improving. And they had kind of said to me, look, you were really unwell. I'd been back and forth to them when I was sick anyway. I'd needed, different things, inhalers and different things. So they said, I think at this point, it's probably post-viral fatigue. And you should expect that to get better in about 12 weeks. So that kind of gave me a goal at that point. I thought, okay, that's okay. We can do 12 weeks. I was maybe about 9 weeks at that point. So I thought, okay, in 3 weeks, I'll get better. That's good news. So, and then I guess I got to the 12-week mark and I still wasn't better. I was starting to see improvements, definitely starting to see improvements in terms of, the fatigue was easing. I was able to do a little bit more. I was able to meet friends for coffee. Nothing in terms of physical exercise, which was the one thing that was, well, not the one thing, there was lots of things, but something that was really difficult for me because I had been so physically active. So that was something I really struggled with. But I was enjoying now that I could start to do little bits and pieces and even being able to go out and join your friends and things like that again was great. And it did start to slowly improve. So Like many of us do, when I started to see that, I started to go back to work. So started to ease myself back into work. Initially, I did kind of a phased return. I did reduced hours and started to build that up. And I guess I had been back and forth to my GP after the 12 weeks, obviously, after I didn't get better after the 12 weeks. And they said, you know, this can just linger sometimes. I still think it's post-viral fatigue. They ran more blood tests. There was nothing coming back. So that I thought at this stage, you know, that's good news. At least I don't have anything else. And they said it could take up to 6 months. So that was kind of my next milestone, was 6 months, which was kind of a big jump for me. But because I think I was seeing those little improvements, I thought I was getting better. And I kind of believed that within that 6 months, I didn't believe that it would take 6 months. I kind of thought there's no way this will take 6 months. And I tried to push through it. You know, I did see the improvement, but at the same time, I also tried to push through it as much as possible, and ignore the symptoms, try to ignore the fatigue the best I could, but not always possible. So for me, it was very up and down, I think, after that. Once I started to see that initial improvement, very up and down over the next kind of 6 to 8 months. I did have periods where I was doing a lot better, and then I got different things, different setbacks and what I would have called relapses. I got a couple of episodes of vertigo, which is something that I've never had before. And they were really difficult, awful, the symptoms of the dizziness. And that was part of periods of being in bed then for a week, waiting for those symptoms to pass. And then obviously the knock-on effect on the fatigue. But throughout that period, I just tried the best that I could to manage. I never got back to doing hikes or cycling or running, any of the things that I love, but I was able to go on short walks. I was able to try and balance my work and going out with friends and things like that. So I thought I was managing, I suppose.
So one of the things that I like to cover in these interviews that people find helpful is things that you tried that weren't helpful. So were there things in that first year, however long, that you tried that really didn't show you any benefit?
You know, that's an interesting question, because I wouldn't say there's things that I tried that didn't work. I actually think it's more the things that I did do that were a bigger hindrance to me. I think for the first year of my illness, I didn't really accept that I was sick. I knew that I wasn't functioning the way I was. That frustrated me greatly, but really, I really fought my illness a lot. I didn't like the idea of being sick. I really resented the fatigue and the impact that it had on my life. And a lot of what I did was try to push through that. I pushed myself. I pushed myself to go out and exercise for longer than I should have, you know, go on longer walks, or if I agreed to plans and then they were coming up and I wasn't quite feeling it, I was either too embarrassed or I just didn't want to miss out. So I went and did them anyway. And now when I look back, I can see that those are the things that were so negatively impacting my ability to recover, because I was making progress. I could see myself making progress. I was getting better. And then I would push myself to go and do the things that I hadn't been able to do, or even silly things like the housework. You know, I would feel better one afternoon, so I would spend 2 hours cleaning the kitchen. I just really missed being active. I just missed my life so much, and I really wasn't willing to accept my illness. I wasn't willing to accept the limitations that it was putting on me. So I think that's a really big part, actually, of what stopped me getting better, and why I had these kind of cycles of improving, doing better, relapsing, improving, and then relapsing. And that certainly happened to me several times throughout my first year, until I had a really bad relapse in September, October 2021, where I think what we've just discussed, where I was pushing myself, it got to a point where my body just said no. I actually took on a new job, which was really high pressured, stressful environment, and same situation, like I had been doing slightly better, and I pushed myself, and I could see the warning signs coming in. I could feel the fatigue, I could feel it take, you know, I could feel the kind of aches and pains coming back into my body. I was having to, at that point, slow down in terms of other aspects of my life, in terms of not going out, or, you know, just focusing on work. And it just got to the point where actually I had a really bad relapse. I was mentally, physically exhausted. and I had to stop. I had to stop working again, and I went back to a place of pretty much having to rest, being back in bed, or if it wasn't bed, it was the sofa, sleeping most of the day, or just resting. And that was, I think, the turning point for me. It was the point where I realized that I'm not going to get better if I keep going, if I keep doing what I'm doing, if I keep trying to ignore this. And actually that was around the same time that I got my diagnosis. So I went to the GP. Obviously at this stage we'd still been calling it post-viral fatigue, and I went back to the GP. They did lots of different blood tests. We did all kinds of tests. And again, they all came back negative. And I think that was really disheartening, actually. And it's one of the things that I know is talked about quite a lot, because it's awful, but you kind of hope that there's something. You hope that there's something there that you can take a pill for, or they can just say, do X, Y, and Z and you'll be better in 3 months. So when that all came back negative, the GP then confirmed that it was chronic fatigue syndrome at this point. I'd been sick for a year. I'd been experiencing fatigue for a year. For me, that was just devastating. It felt like the worst possible outcome. Being told you have a chronic illness with no treatment plan, with so many people that never get better from it, and that my life was going to be limited the way that it had been forever, for me was just, it was definitely the worst point for me. Apart from the initial illness, that was such a low point for me, but actually something that I really needed. Because I was in denial about how sick I was. I wasn't really trying to get better, I don't think. I was just trying to get pushed through it, and that made me stop. The diagnosis, and also I suppose the point that I got to where I relapsed so badly, made me stop. I had no choice to. I couldn't physically keep going. And I suppose at that time then I was able to reflect a lot on how the last year had been. And it was at that point I kind of realized that I was sick, and I kind of realized how I had been contributing to it, those cycles of going, because I was thinking back and thinking, no, but I did this in the summer, or I did this, there was times when I was better. And then when I looked at it, I go, yeah, but then that's when you pushed it. That's when you relapsed, and I could see it. So that was a real turning point for me, where then I made the decision that I had to focus on myself. I had to focus on my health. And I made myself a promise at that stage. I made myself a promise that I was going to get fully better. I didn't know how at this point, because I'd really only been given a diagnosis, and one which I was told that most people don't get better from. But I made myself a promise that I was going to get better. And this time I was going to focus on my health. I was going to just slow down, stop, and focus on me.
That is so relatable. I'm nodding my head as you're talking, because it's probably relatable to so many people. But I remember getting sick, and as a lot of people know, I grew up with a mother who was living with chronic fatigue syndrome. So I knew this illness well. But when I got sick for months, I was in denial. I should have been able to diagnose myself within the first few weeks, but I just no, it's not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. I refuse to accept or, internalize any sort of illness identity. This is I just my head in the sand. And then I remember all those tests coming back negative, and then I got one came back positive for Lyme disease, and they diagnosed me with chronic Lyme disease, and it was like the best news ever. It was like winning the lottery. It just pulled me out of this deep depression. I was so excited to have chronic Lyme disease. I mean, one, it wasn't chronic fatigue syndrome, because that just felt like a death sentence, which we now know it's not. And then two, it gives you hope. You're like, okay, I can tackle this. This is something concrete. There are like drugs I can take and things that you can do. So such a weird mental roller coaster we all go on this, it seems. So eventually, I mean, you're sitting here now, you're doing great. So what happened between that place of, that big crash and then getting you to where you are now?
Yeah, so once I kind of had my diagnosis, and I realized that this was really serious, and that I couldn't just keep going as I was going, and I made that decision to get better, then I kind of put all my energy, any energy that I had in a day, instead of using it to push through in a different way, I used it to research. And I spent a lot of time in bed and a lot of time on the sofa with my laptop. So it was all there, and I listened to podcasts, I read journals, I spent time on YouTube, Instagram, reading books. So one of the first YouTube channels actually I came across was your YouTube channel, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Here are people that have actually got better. And I found your story so inspiring. You had been sick for so much longer than me as well. And I just thought, I don't know how anybody could do it. Do you know, at this point I say only, but I'd only been sick for a year. And I was already at a point where I thought, this cannot be my life. So I so related to you, but also was in awe of how much longer your journey had been. I found it so inspiring as well that even after all that time, you were able to get better. So I thought, oh my goodness, if somebody can get better after all of that time, you know, hopefully I can too. And I haven't done too much damage over the last year that I can't come back from this. And then from there, actually, I read your book as well. So there was things, and started then looking across different sources to kind of figure out what was right for me. One of the resources that I found really useful was Alex Hard's Decode Your Fatigue, and it comes with an online resource as well. So that was really useful for me. Piecing that together with all the different bits that I'd been reading and listening to, I was able to kind of understand that there are success stories, that people have figured this out, that there are ways to get better, but actually there's no specific way to do that this is very individual to each person, which was really insightful, really frustrating, because of course, same thing, like I just want to be able to follow the exact same things that you did and make that work for me. But I realized quite quickly that isn't how this works. And I did find the Decode Your Fatigue quite useful for me to start identifying where I should maybe initially start, or different things that I should start trying, or different aspects that I need to address. And certainly with that, understanding, I think, the physiology of what is happening, because that's so misunderstood or not talked about, or not understood, I guess, in with this illness, is actually what is happening internally. And when I could actually pick up pieces of information that could explain how the energy system was working and how it was impacting potentially the impact of my nervous system, that felt like such a breakthrough for me, because I thought, okay, well, there's something there. There's definitely something in this. You know, why was I not told this by my GP, or why was I not told this, you know, with this? I actually got referred on to specialist clinics and all of that. And this information hadn't come to me through through those different channels. So it was like, it was groundbreaking for me, and it helped me to identify, I suppose, where I should be starting. So that was kind of, I think I probably spent, I would say, at least a month doing research before I actually did anything, because I'm that type of person. I want to have all of the information when I'm going to do something. I spent a year ignoring this and not doing anything, but I wasn't just about to just jump into the first thing. I had to have all of the information, which is so difficult to do when you have fatigue. It's you have such a finite amount of time that you can actually get the information, which just feels unfair. But so I started to put these different pieces together, and I did a few things. And I started in January 2022, which felt like a nice, new, clean start to the year. I thought, this is the year that I'm going to get better. I'm going to leave my chronic fatigue in 2023. And this is my New Year's goal, is that by next year I will be better. So some of the initial things I started to do through the likes of reading your book was I cut out refined sugar, I cut out caffeine, and I cut out alcohol, which were all, and I also started introducing live culture, so kombucha and kefir into my diet. And then I started taking supplements, way too many supplements, I would say, as we probably most of us have done. And to be honest, the supplements, I'm not sure. Then I started to research it further. Obviously the supplements are very linked to being in, you know, the nervous system and your body being in the right place. If you're putting supplements into your body and your nervous system is in a fight or flight stage, you're not going to benefit from those anyway. But anyway, I thought I'll take the supplements. So I suppose there was the dietary changes. One of the big things I started in January was cold water swimming. So I'd seen a lot of research and read a lot of research that it was really good for the nervous system and really good for your immune system. So I live not too far from the sea, about 15-20 minutes. So I thought that's something I can do. So in the middle of winter, I started swimming in the Irish Sea. And I really believe that is one of the one of the things that I did that had a really big impact on starting that kind of kickstarting me back into a recovery state. I was in such a bad place, and this was one of the, I think for a couple of reasons, it was one of the few things that I could actually do that felt like any kind of form of activity. I had such limited energy. I wasn't able to exercise, which was so incredibly frustrating for me. But this actually felt like I was getting outside, which I love. I was getting to the beach, and I was taking on a new challenge that wasn't going to be really, that wasn't going to be, that it wasn't a huge risk to me. There wasn't a risk in terms of overexerting myself. And it was something that I initially was really challenging. I do not like the cold at all. Initially, when I first did it, I think I was in and out in 30 seconds, but I did get that buzz from it, that kind of that sense of accomplishment, that achievement, and that rush of what I'd done. And it was really positive. So I started to build it up. I went kind of 2-3 times a week, and then I really started to see the benefits. I was able to build it up to kind of 5-6 minutes in the water. And for that time, it did feel like everything, my whole body was just calm. My brain slowed down. I stopped overthinking. I wasn't catastrophizing. All I could think, it cleared my mind. And the only thing that I could think about was being cold and how pretty it was. And it was so calming. So I think that's something that I have really benefited from. And I think was really, really helpful in that piece around calming my nervous system. And also boosting my immune system, and something that I still do actually. I still try and get to the sea once a week, sometimes more, sometimes less, but something that never thought I'd be a sea swimmer, but I absolutely love it now. And then I also did a brain retraining program with Jason, who I actually found through your channel. And I think the brain retraining was maybe the piece that tied all of this together for me, because I think what was hugely important for me was that piece of slowing down, not getting back to the place where I was before, just pushing through, but also trying to break some of those negative thoughts that I had developed. I had become very focused on the things that I couldn't do. Even if I would go out for a walk, I would say, well, I went out for a 15-minute walk. I used to be able to run for an hour. Everything was such a comparison to what I used to be able to do. I just was never satisfied. And constantly, I think, fighting that internal battle. So this really helped me the brain retraining program really helped me to change my mindset and then also pulling in that meditation piece. And I think it was really important for pulling this all together and working with the piece of calming my nervous system, which now that I look back, I think that was probably the main thing that was contributing to my chronic fatigue. I think that I was in probably a chronic stress state, and both from the life that I had before I got sick, but then also how negatively impacted I was from being sick, and constantly then that symptom checking, and when then I got my diagnosis, the kind of catastrophizing, all of that constant worry, anxiety, that constant on that you are with the illness. So I definitely think that is maybe one of the key contributors.
Yeah, it's something that I hear a lot, and it is absolutely a trauma getting an illness like this. And I think we're just so in it. It's hard to even recognize in the moment the level of impact that it's having on you. And it almost feels like a luxury to deal with the mental health component of it, because you're just in survival mode and trying to find what you need to do to recover. And, you have all these physical symptoms, but it's like, your life slams on the brakes and all these things are taken away from you. And there's so much grief in there, and your whole identity changes, and it's massive.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I massively struggled with. Your whole life is changed overnight. And I guess it even takes time for you to catch up, because it happened so quickly for me, but it also happened so slowly because I got sick, but I just didn't get better when you expected to. And that change of life for me was so difficult to process. It was so difficult to deal with. And even that piece that you said around mental health, it's so massive with the likes of CFS, a piece that I think I overlooked, certainly. And I think a lot then when I was coming into looking at how to get better, potentially a piece that I overlooked initially as well. Like, and you do start to think about what can I do for my diet? What supplements can I take?
Mm-hmm.
But actually that piece, definitely the piece around meditation, was really helpful for me in terms of getting better. And I don't know what else I was going to say.
Yeah, it sounds like it was not so much the physical stuff that you were doing. It's just when I listen, okay, here's my thoughts. A lot of us have different pieces that vary a bit in our recovery. And I think some of us have come to appreciate, like for you, the cold water swimming was a big thing. And I did cold showers with my recovery and I felt that they helped me a lot too, but it sounds like we thought they helped us for different reasons. I thought it was helping my lymphatic system and, all those physical things. But for you, it seemed like it calmed your mind and it calmed your nervous system and it gave you a piece of your old self back. And whereas for me, putting a lot of focus on food was massively helpful. And I'm sure that the food helped. Like I completely fixed my gut. It was a mess. Cleaning up your diet is always going to be a good thing. But I think at the time it was just sort of taking control of something and that sort of positive association. And it was calming my mind and calming my nervous system and feeling like, okay, I'm doing things, I'm getting better. So I think sometimes, things that look so different on our recovery journey, whether it be cold water swimming or focusing on your diet, or, graded exercise therapy. It's just finding something for you that doesn't stress you out, that resonates, that makes you happy. And then you just kind of start to like slowly expose yourself to more and more. And it just helps you on your recovery journey. Did you find that as well?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And that is what's so interesting, because why do different things work for different people? And I think that's actually what you've just said there sums it up perfectly. It's what it unlocks within you. For me, the cold water swimming was so freeing, and I don't know if that was, I can't be sure that that's the thing that definitely kickstarted my recovery, but it gave me such a focus. It gave me such a positive mental output. It gave me a sense of achievement for the first time in over a year that I had been able to do something. This was the first time in over a year that I had done something that I had never done before. And also I was starting to get better at something. I started with 30 seconds and then I was able to stay in the water for 5 minutes, and I was pushing myself physically. I was pushing myself mentally. I was seeing myself get better. And I think that kind of, that momentum starts to build where you go, oh, look, I can do this, and look at the positive impact this has had on me. And then I was able to kind of move that and continue with that energy. And I do think that that's where I was kind of chatting about the brain retraining as well. It is very much this is where the piece around the brain retraining and any of the mental health side of things, I worry that for people that don't understand this can think that this is in your head or you created your illness. And these are two very different things, And I suppose, even when I was looking at the likes of brain retraining or meditation, initially I was a little reluctant to it, because it does feel like that. It does feel like somebody is saying, this is a psychological issue, when you experience it every single day. This is very real. And you feel the impact it has on your body. You are so stuck and controlled by this. It's not psychological in any way, but actually, in everyday life, we can't separate physical and mental health. So when addressing any illness and addressing this illness, which has such a detrimental impact on your well-being, of course we can't separate physical and mental health.
Yeah, it's so crazy how we do that. Brain, mental health, body, physical health. But our brain is our control center for our entire body. Like, it's a massively important organ, probably I would say our most important organ. So having that division that happens at our neck, up and down, I think really can hinder us in our understanding of the body. Like, what's happening here? A lot of it is coming from here. When we feel pain here, it's because something up here is signaling it to send those pain signals there. So it's, this is what conventional medicine and society and everything has let us. It's understandable we think this way. We think you go to a psychiatrist or you go to a regular doctor. It's two separate things. They don't overlap, when very much it all is all very much connected. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, that mind-body connection piece for me was so important. And I think probably something that I had massively missed, which is so interesting because I worked in mental health for 3 years before I got better. And when I was looking at how I got better, I immediately went to physical responses. I immediately went to looking at it's a physical problem. This is not a mind-body problem. And I think that's then when I started to find the research about the nervous system, the likes of the mind body connection. It started to make a lot more sense to me, actually, how all of this was operating. And then that's when I started to do the likes of the meditation and things like that, and realizing I couldn't just fix this by focus on my physical health. I had to be prioritizing both aspects of it if this was going to work.
I think we need to stop calling it the mind-body connection. I think this is holding it back, because I think when people hear, a lot of people anyways, hear mind-body connection, we think all in your head, like mind versus body. I think if we started calling it the brain-body connection, it would feel more real. Like, oh, right, that really important organ in our head and how it's connected to the rest of our body and impacting the symptoms that we're feeling. Because mind-body sounds a little bit woo. Like, it just sounds a little bit like not so, I don't know, not something that should be taken so seriously. But if person after person after person I interview has told me it's been integral for their recovery.
Yeah, and I agree, because I think we put this into holistic therapies. We put this into airy fairy. It's not traditional. And when we call it mind-body connection, maybe we are minimizing what this really is. The brain is the most important organ in our body, so of course it has a vital part to play when we're not well. And when we're not well with something like CFS, the role of the brain is actually huge, but so quick to be overlooked.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad everybody brings it up. I think it's an important topic. And the more we talk about it, and the more we normalize it, and then the more people will be more open-minded to the brain-body connection, which I'm going to call it from here moving forward. But I'm wondering, I know people appreciate hearing. I always love to hear, because you've been through something incredibly hard and traumatic and terrible. But a lot of people find that it has changed them. So you described your life before all of this as really good, really exciting, really wonderful. So how do you feel now compared to then? How has this changed who you are as a person?
I would say my life is better now than it was before I got sick, which is never something I thought I would say, especially when I was really unwell. But do you know what? This changed me. It changed me for the better. My life was, as I said, my life was really busy, really active before, but probably focused on the wrong things and probably too busy. I was a person that was always pushing, always wanting to achieve, and I didn't really take much downtime or didn't really prioritize myself a lot. And that's something that's changed massively. My priorities have changed. Now I value so much the life that I have. One of the things that I truly value is being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, not having to constantly think about if I can do it, if it's going to, even things like being asked out for lunch, thinking, can I do that? What else have I got on? See that the freeness that I have in my mind now. And it's something that I'm not going to take for granted. My health is not something I'm going to take for granted. And when I was really unwell, that really became apparent to me that I didn't want to go back to my old life. Yes, I wanted to get better, but there was so much I felt that I was missing out on. And none of that was being tied down, to a laptop or work. It was the exciting things. It was missing out with friends and family. It was travel. It was vacations. It was walks with my dog on the beach. It was not being able to sign up to a triathlon or a leg of the marathon that I'll be doing in a few weeks with my family. So I think my priorities in life have definitely changed, and where I focus my time and energy has definitely changed. And I also give myself permission to rest. I do consider myself now fully recovered, but actually I can see that sometimes those negative traits start to filter back in. There was a period there last month. and I went through, it was a really stressful time. And about a week later, I started to feel really tired. So I rested. I actually give myself permission to do that. Whereas before I didn't. I listened to my body, I rested, but it went on for a few days. And I thought, oh my goodness, is this fatigue? Is that what this is? And that panic started to set in. And then I took a step back and I reflected and I looked at that period of time, that really stressful period of time that I'd had, and all of the really bad things that I had been doing during that time. I hadn't prioritized myself. I was pushing myself. I wasn't taking any time to rest. I wasn't taking any time to relax. I was pushing myself way beyond my limits. I was overstretching myself. I was really stressed. I wasn't prioritizing the things that I enjoy. I wasn't taking time to exercise. So no, this wasn't a relapse, but this was a sure warning sign of what happens when I become overstressed, or what happens when I fall back into that pattern of, I suppose, overexerting myself. And that was just actually a really nice reminder of not to go back to those old ways and the impact that stress can have. And that I'm not immune to feeling the negative implications of that. So for me, it's really important now that actually I'm balancing things. And if I am going through a stressful period of time, I'm making sure that self-care gets factored into that, and prioritizing the things that I enjoy come into that.
Yeah, I think that's a really normal and important part of recovery for all of us, is one, not letting those old habits come back in, and they're going to, those kind of overdoing it, overachiever, whatever you want to call it, and finding new ways to live a more balanced life. And then two, just not being afraid and normalizing that sometimes you're not going to feel okay. And that's okay. Like, you're not going to feel great every moment of every day for the rest of your life just because you've put this illness behind you. You're still going to get tired or laid out if you get very stressed or you overdo it. But it's scary. I think it's a whole part of the recovery. It spills over into life being recovered, that we have to keep working on these things and normalizing these things, and just like, it's okay. I'm human. I'm a human being. I'm not going to be perfect all the time. But yeah, understandable to question when these things come up. I'm thinking too, because I know you said that doing Jason McTiernan's program was a big part of your recovery. I'm going to link on the screen here sometime coming up. Watch for it. An interview that I did recently with him where he shares some really helpful information. He's just a really great guy, and he's helping a lot of people, and he's got a lot of really practical information and insights and strategies. So encourage you to check it out if this resonated for you. Thank you so much, Judith, for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know these stories mean so much to people. I know it can be a scary, vulnerable thing to put yourself out there and share your story, but I know it's going to mean a lot to a lot of people. So thank you for your bravery today and for taking the time to do this.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to let me share my story. It's so exciting to be here and to now be on the other side of it, where I spent so long watching these videos. So it's been a pleasure to share it.
It's an honor to help share your story. I appreciate you coming on. And to those of you watching, thank you for watching. As always, looking forward to your comments. What are your thoughts about all of this? What's been working for you? Let's keep working together. We know there isn't one single path. If this doesn't resonate, what is something that has been helpful for you? Let's just keep sharing our information, sharing our journeys, and helping each other out, because this is how I see we're getting each other out of this every week. So there's never been a time to be more hopeful than now. So if you're currently facing a health condition like this, hang in there. You have totally got this. I believe your answers are out there. Keep searching. Don't give up until you find them. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see you in the next one.